Welcome to today's deep dive. We have built this specifically for you.
Yeah, we have.
We're taking this massive stack of material and really distilling it down to the most important paradigm-shifting insights.
Right, the stuff that actually matters.
Exactly. And if you've ever felt a profound disconnect between what you believe and how you actually talk about it in the real world, you are absolutely in the right place today.
For sure.
Because today's source material is this incredibly comprehensive hands-on training manual. It's called the Everyday Evangelism Practicum.
And it is dense. I mean, there's a lot to get through.
There really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore what this text presents as a radical reframing of how faith is shared. We're looking at how this manual argues that ordinary, seemingly mundane conversations are actually the most powerful tools for evangelism.
Yeah, which is not how we usually think about it.
Not at all. The goal here is to bridge that deeply frustrating gap between knowing that sharing your faith matters and actually doing it when you're just standing at the water cooler or sitting at a family dinner.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, please do, because Chapter 1 is...
It's intense.
Yeah.
Chapter 1 of this practicum starts with a really uncomfortable truth.
Oh.
It points out that most believers are highly trained to admire evangelism from afar. Like, we applaud the missionaries, we applaud the guest speakers,
Sure.
but then we completely freeze up and hesitate in the office break room. And the text argues that this hesitation, it isn't born out of apathy.
Right. It's not that people don't care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not that you don't care, and it isn't even a lack of courage, which was surprising to read. The real problem, according to this manual, is simply a lack of practical training.
A total lack of training. And that stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of what evangelism even is in the first place.
How so?
Well, the text suggests that traditional evangelism is almost universally treated as this highly specialized skill. It's framed as a job reserved exclusively for the spiritually extroverted.
The outgoing folks.
Right. Or something that only happens at a highly staged, heavily produced church event, like if you don't have a microphone or a theological degree, you feel totally unqualified.
Wow, yeah.
But this practicum completely dismantles that idea.
Yeah.
It presents evangelism not as an isolated, high-pressure event, but as a continuous, quiet lifestyle.
A lifestyle.
Yes, it argues that it is not about confrontation. It is not about winning a debate and leaving the other person speechless. It is entirely about presence.
Presence.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is the theological foundation the source builds this on.
Yeah.
The core mantra of the entire first section is identity before activity.
Identity before activity. I really want to pause on that phrase because the guide uses a brilliantly simple analogy from the Gospel of Matthew to explain it.
Oh, the salt and light thing.
Yes. It looks at that famous passage about being salt and light. And the author makes this incredibly practical observation. Salt doesn't have to labor or sweat to be salty. It doesn't go to the gym to work on its saltiness.
No.
And light doesn't, strain its muscles to shine. They just exist as what they inherently are.
They just are.
Exactly. In the same way, the source argues that witnessing isn't supposed to be this exhausting white-knuckle performance. It should just be the natural overflow of a redeemed identity.
Yeah.
But let me challenge that for a second. If the focus is just on being present and letting your life shine, doesn't that risk turning into quietism? Like, how does the practicum keep people from just using presence as a convenient excuse to never actually open their mouths and talk about their faith?
That is exactly the trap the manual anticipates. It does not say presence replaces words. It says presence gives your words weight.
Gives them weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to back this up, the source leans heavily into the theological concept of the priesthood of all believers. This is drawn from 1 Peter chapter 2.
Right.
And the practicum makes it really clear that this isn't just some decorative, archaic theology.
Yeah.
It means that every single believer is a royal priest.
Everyone.
Whether you are a corporate accountant, a pediatric nurse, a civil engineer, a stay-at-home parent, your daily vocation is meant to mediate a divine presence to the people around you.
Wow.
And a priest doesn't just stand there silently, right? A priest represents God to the people and the people to God. But the difference is where the pressure lies. The text draws a very sharp line between performance evangelism and identity-driven evangelism.
And the psychology of that difference is huge. Reading through the manual, the description of performance evangelism is honestly so painfully relatable.
Oh, complete.
It's that anxious internal monologue where you are constantly asking yourself, did I say everything correctly? Did I hit all the four spiritual laws? Did I accidentally commit a heresy?
Right.
It turns the person you're talking to into a project, or worse, a quota.
Exactly.
But identity-driven evangelism, on the other hand, simply asks, was I faithful to love this person and speak the truth?
Yep.
The source notes that the performance mindset produces massive anxiety and usually results in extreme awkwardness, while the identity mindset produces simple, quiet obedience.
It takes the pressure off.
It really does. So for you listening, think about your own daily routines for a second. Think about your morning commute, standing in line at the grocery store, just answering emails at your desk.
Yeah.
The practicum challenges you to see these not as annoying interruptions to your spiritual life, but as the very context of your ministry.
Which fundamentally shifts the geographic focus of where faith happens. We have this tendency to think ministry happens in a building with stained glass on Sunday mornings.
Right.
But to prove that this isn't how it was designed to work, the source dives into the history of the early Christian church. And the data there completely upends our modern assumption.
Completely.
When you look at how the early church experienced such explosive exponential growth in the first century, it wasn't just because of the famous apostles standing on platforms giving brilliant sermons.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the guide brings up a specific historical moment in the book of Acts chapter 8.
Yeah.
We always picture Peter or Paul driving the growth of the church. But when severe persecution scattered the early church out of Jerusalem, the text points out that the people who went about preaching the word weren't the professional clergy.
No, the apostles actually stayed behind in Jerusalem.
Exactly. The people spreading the faith across the known world were ordinary, displaced believers. We are talking about merchants, mothers, craftsmen, farmers who had literally been forced out of their homes.
And the source gets into the original language here to explain what those ordinary people were actually doing. The Greek term used in that passage is euangelizomenoi.
Wait, euangelizomenoi, break that down.
Now it's helpful.
What does that actually mean in practice? Because it sounds like a very heavy theological word for preaching.
It does sound intimidating, but its meaning is the exact opposite. The text explains that it does not mean delivering formal, structured sermons from a pulpit. It translates roughly to ordinary proclamation.
Ordinary proclamation.
Yeah, it means announcing good news in the middle of a normal daily conversation.
Yeah.
It's the kind of sharing you do when you recommend a great restaurant or tell someone about a cure for a disease.
Oh, I see.
The manual gives a perfect example of this with a woman named Lydia from Acts chapter 16.
Right, Lydia.
She was a businesswoman dealing in high-value purple cloth. She catered to the elite, and the practicum points out that she didn't leave her business to go be a traditional missionary. Instead, her existing social position and her relational reach in the marketplace became a superhighway for the gospel.
Her business wasn't a distraction from the mission field, it was the mission field.
Precisely. The source uses these historical examples to synthesize a major cultural critique for us today. We have to completely collapse the sacred-secular divide.
Right.
There is this persistent illusion that church buildings are holy ground, but workplaces, gyms, neighborhoods are spiritually neutral or even profane.
Yeah.
The practicum rejects that entirely. It argues that mission actually thrives on proximity and decentralized obedience. Your office cubicle or your neighborhood block association is just as much a sacred space for witness as any sanctuary.
Okay, so the theology is inspiring. Collapsing the sacred-secular divide sounds great.
Yeah.
But I was looking at page 40 of this practicum, and it shifts heavily into the how-to. It outlines some incredibly practical tools to move believers from this grand theory into Tuesday morning action.
Yes, the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. The first strategy is a concept they call mapping. The guide literally asks you to sit down and map out your relational networks. But it doesn't just mean your close friends. It wants you to map your workplace, your extended family, your weekend hobbies, your online communities.
And the psychology behind that mapping exercise is brilliant.
It really is.
When you don't map your life, evangelism feels like this random, intimidating chore where you have to cold call strangers on the street.
Yes.
But when you map out a hypothetical week, say you go to the same gym every Tuesday, you grab coffee from the same barista on Wednesday, you sit in the same Thursday morning Zoom meeting, Evangelism becomes strategic.
You realize you are already embedded in these networks. The people are already there.
Exactly.
And once you realize who is already in your network, the practicum introduces what I think is its most radical shift in methodology.
Oh, the listening piece.
Yes, it states plainly that listening is evangelism.
Yeah.
The source points out a profound human truth here. Most of the time, people don't actively reject the gospel message itself. They reject feeling unheard.
That is so true.
They have an incredible, highly tuned radar for when they are being treated as a religious sales project or a notch on a spiritual belt.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that Jesus modeled this perfectly. He didn't treat people like projects.
He really didn't. The source highlights how Jesus interacted with the Samaritan woman at the well. He didn't walk up, hand her a tract, and start a theological debate. He started a genuine conversation during a routine, everyday chore. Drawing water. He just asked for a drink.
Yeah.
Or consider when he met Bartimaeus, who was blind. Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?"
Such a great question.
The text emphasizes that Jesus used questions that drew out the heart, rather than forcing a pre-rehearsed agenda onto the person before knowing anything about their actual pain or desires.
And to help modern readers replicate that kind of engagement, the practicum provides very specific conversation starters.
I loved these.
They're great. The advice is to completely avoid arguing theology out of the gate. Arguments just put people on the defensive immediately.
Right.
Instead, the manual suggests asking questions that invite reflection and show genuine curiosity. Things like, where do you find hope when life feels uncertain?
Wow.
Or simply, has faith ever played a role in your life? These are questions designed to open doors that aggressive theological debates would immediately slam shut.
And the source goes beyond just giving you a list of questions. It actually details practice drills for listening.
Which we all need.
Because, let's be honest, most of us are terrible listeners.
We really are.
We listen just long enough to formulate our own response.
Exactly.
But the manual trains readers in the active art of listening. That means practicing how to reflect back what you've just heard to show genuine empathy. It means learning how to sit in silence and avoid interrupting. And it means asking clarifying questions instead of immediately jumping in with the right religious answer the second the other person takes a breath.
And that level of deep listening naturally leads into another major theme in the practicum, which is contextual intelligence. The guide asserts that while a core gospel message is universal and unchanging, the communication of it must be incarnational.
Wait, incarnational, that's another heavy theological word. In this context, are we just talking about embodying the message, like meeting people exactly where they are in the specific culture they inhabit?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It means adapting your approach to fit the environment, just as the incarnation was about entering humanity's specific context.
Got it.
The manual breaks this down beautifully across different spheres of life. Take the workplace, for example.
Right.
The text explicitly says, you must respect institutional policies. It strictly warns against any form of coercion or using a position of power to force a spiritual conversation.
Because that backfires entirely.
Exactly. In a professional setting, faith is made persuasive through your integrity, your work ethic, and your character over a long period of time. You earn the right to speak.
But then you turn the page and the dynamic shifts completely when talking about family.
Oh, yeah.
The text notes that family requires immense patience and deep humility. It's the classic Thanksgiving dinner scenario.
I've been there.
Performance evangelism is that cold sweat you get trying to figure out how to seamlessly pivot from discussing the NFL playoffs to the Book of Romans without sounding completely unhinged to your uncle.
It never works.
It never works. The practicum reminds us that relational transformation with relatives usually takes years, not days. They know all your flaws, so your words have to be backed up by a lifetime of consistent love.
And then the manual tackles digital spaces, which it fascinatingly compares to modern Areopaguses.
The Areopagus. Let's unpack that for a second. That's a reference to the Apostle Paul in Athens, right? Acts chapter 17.
That's the one.
He's standing in the public square reasoning with the Greek philosophers.
Yes, and the author argues that our online forums, comment sections, and social media platforms are today's public squares. It's where the culture debates ideas.
Wow.
But the text gives a stark warning here. Engaging in the digital Areopagus requires explicit, visible grace. It requires a conscious, disciplined effort to avoid the outrage and polarization that define 90% of the internet.
That is so true.
You can't evangelize someone while simultaneously dunking on them for likes.
You really can't. But whether you are navigating the politics of the office, the baggage of your family, or the toxicity of the internet, there is a universal barrier the text addresses head on.
Fear.
Fear, evangelism anxiety, that deep-seated, incredibly human fear of social rejection, because nobody wants to be the weird outcast.
This raises an important question. How do we actually overcome that very natural fear of rejection? Because training and mapping only get you so far if you're paralyzed by the thought of someone rolling their eyes at you.
The practicum tackles this by asking the reader to completely reframe what rejection actually is.
Okay.
First, it argues that someone turning away from your conversation or changing the subject is not a personal failure on your part.
Yeah.
You didn't necessarily do it wrong. Instead, the text frames it as a participation in the sufferings of Christ.
Wow.
It cites the Gospel of John, chapter 1, which says, "His own did not receive him." The logic is simple but profound. If Jesus himself faced rejection when he offered truth and love, ordinary believers shouldn't be shocked or devastated when they face it too.
And beyond reframing that social sting, the source provides massive theological relief. It reminds the reader of their actual job description.
The job description.
Yeah. The believer is merely the instrument. You are just the messenger. According to the text, the Holy Spirit is the primary evangelist who actually convicts hearts, referencing John chapter 16. And furthermore, citing 1 Corinthians chapter 3, the manual reminds us that one person plants the seed, another waters it, but it is God who gives the growth.
That is huge.
It is. This theological reality is designed to take all the high-stakes sales pitch pressure off the individual. You don't have to close the deal or manufacture a spiritual conversion. You just have to be a faithful, present witness.
So what does this all mean? If we aren't supposed to be counting conversions or closing deals like car salesmen, how do we know if we're actually doing it right?
Your question.
The source spends a whole chapter pointing out a massive problem with modern church metrics. Today, when we treat a church like a corporation, success is almost always measured by corporate standards.
Yeah, the numbers game.
Exactly. Numerical conversions, weekly butts and seats attendance figures, or how slick and well-produced a Sunday event is.
And the practicum argues that those corporate-style metrics are actually toxic to everyday evangelism.
Toxic.
Yes. When we use those metrics, we accidentally turn our neighbors into quotas. And as we discussed, non-believers have an incredible radar for that.
I absolutely do.
The manual demands a complete paradigm shift, moving away from outcome-based metrics, which you can't control anyway, and replacing them with faithfulness-based metrics.
I love how granular the text gets here. It says success should be defined by obedience in the things you can actually control.
Right.
Success is the number of spiritual conversations you initiated this week, regardless of how they ended.
Yes.
Success is how many members of your small group have been practically equipped to listen well. Success is the number of stories shared and missional habits actively reinforced.
But the author knows that human nature drifts back to the path of least resistance. Good intentions fade without structure.
So true.
So, to sustain these new metrics, the guide introduces an accountability framework. This includes weekly peer check-ins and the establishment of prayer partnerships.
I love that.
But the centerpiece of this framework is the reflection journal. The manual provides a template that walks the believer through a daily 4-step rhythm.
Pray, notice, engage, reflect.
Exactly. Pray for opportunities in the morning. Notice where the Spirit might be working during your day. Engage in a simple conversation. And then reflect in the evening on what happened, regardless of the outcome.
And the culmination of all this daily journaling and mapping is what the text calls debrief and testimony sharing.
Yeah?
This is modeled directly after Acts chapter 4, when Peter and John go back to their friends and report what happened to them.
Oh, that's a great connection.
The idea is that when you get together with your community and share stories of your ordinary, everyday obedience, maybe it was just asking a coworker how they are finding hope during a tough week, and maybe it was super awkward, it completely normalizes the process.
It really does.
Hearing someone else's story of trying, maybe failing, or maybe having a breakthrough conversation, it multiplies courage across the entire community. It proves that you don't have to be perfect to be used.
It strips away the intimidation factor. When evangelism is redefined as lifting well, praying for your network, and sharing simple stories of faith, it ceases to be a specialized department of the church.
Right.
It becomes the living, breathing culture of the community. It becomes an identity.
It really is a beautiful vision when you lay it all out.
It is.
To summarize what we've unpacked today from the Everyday Evangelism Practicum, The core message is that sharing your faith isn't some heavy added burden.
No.
It is not a theatrical performance you have to gear up for. It is simply the natural overflow of a life that has been trained to see the extraordinary divine potential hidden inside completely ordinary moments.
It requires a profound shift in how we view our placement in the world.
Yeah.
And as we discussed, you don't need a pulpit to proclaim truth.
Right.
And you don't need a script to show genuine empathy. You just need to be present and willing.
Exactly. So for you listening right now, remember that your greatest mission field isn't necessarily a plane ride overseas.
Yeah.
It is most likely sitting right across the table from you. Your daily schedule, your Tuesday morning commute, your workplace, your weekend hobbies. The source argues that none of these are random. These are all divinely orchestrated placements. You are exactly where you need to be.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply challenging perspective from the text regarding our modern digital landscape. We talked about the internet being today's Areopagus.
Yes, to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, the source notes that the digital world has the unprecedented power to massively amplify our witness, reaching people we would never meet in person.
For sure.
But it also has the exact same power to magnify our hypocrisy. The practicum lays down a heavy truth to end on. Character must precede commentary.
Wow.
So, as you log onto your social media timelines today, stepping into your own modern Areopagus, ask yourself this. Are the comments and the tone you use online building a relational bridge for the gospel? Or are they constructing the very walls of hypocrisy that keep people away? Something to think about as you map out your everyday life.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.